Folks, I'm going to hit record now, so we're on Zoom.
We will explain. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
So I was just asking everybody, because we have masks and the air conditioning, and we want people here to hear on Zoom, you use it as much of your voice as you can. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to begin. So, okay, I'm Robbie Reed, I'm Chair of Public Health and Safety on Council. I'm joined by Bob Weismore and Cindy Rickards, also members of Public Health and Safety. Our Mayor, Andrew Deutsch, is here as well. And we're here with our newly appointed Police Advisory Committee, and all 5 members are here. So first, we want to just welcome you and thank you for applying and being willing to join. We appreciate the time and effort. And we want to offer just a little bit of context to give you our request, our charge for what research we're most interested in, and maybe we can decide on meeting time. We'll see how far we get, but I think we would be done by 7:30 or so. Okay, so I was beginning to explain a little bit to Cheryl. This committee, Public Health and Safety on Council, was originally just public safety, and the focus was exclusively police and fire. Pretty much just police and fire. Over the last couple of years, Council voted to expand public safety to public health and safety so that we could look at climate change in addition to police and fire. Understanding that climate change is a public health concern. So we established the EAC, the Environmental Advisory Council, which is a group of 5, and they have been making recommendations to our committee in the form of memos. And that's been incredibly useful to our committee, and we make recommendations up to the full council, and there's a vote of the 7 members. So when it comes to doing research that as council members we don't have the time to undertake, we really lean on the committees that support our work, and that's primarily the EAC and now you as the PAC. We know that public safety is just as important as public health, and so as we kind of restructured the committee, we realized the imbalance that we didn't have a committee on the public safety side to do the kind of equivalent research that the EAC is doing. So it's really more a kind of internal reorganization that kind of prompted the creation of this committee, I would say, rather than any specific event that I'm aware of, or any type of one of Cheryl's questions. So one of the things that council does is we control the purse strings. So we advise on the budget together with the manager. So there are lots of decisions kind of on the horizon in terms of funding decisions for police, and in terms of vehicles, in terms of equipment in particular, but also personnel decisions in terms of replacing people that after people might leave. So the mayor controls the policy of the police. This is according to the Borough Code, and oversees day-to-day operations unless she delegates that authority. So there's a very clear division of labor between the mayor and the council, and we just want to be clear from the beginning that we are asking for your help in doing research on kind of best practices, and your research would result in recommendations that would be advisory to our committee. Then as a committee, and our committee includes the mayor, we would kind of vet those recommendations and decide, is this something we would recommend directly to the mayor? Is this something we would recommend to the full council? It kind of depends if it's a purse string issue or a policy issue. So that's just kind of some context. I hope that's a little bit helpful. So we have this specific charge that we have come up with as a committee. We've shared it with the mayor. So we'd like to share this with you and then see what questions you have. So I'll just pass that around.
Is this publicly available anywhere?
Not yet.
I think we announced it in
Yeah.
one of our meetings.
So I mean, this
The memo.
document,
Document?
will be.
No, but the charge was stated in the.
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah, the charge was publicly discussed at the last public.
Yeah.
It was publicly stated.
Yeah.
No, because I'm balancing this. Thank you, though.
Yeah, so, we take, why don't you take a glance at it and then see the questions. Yeah. So, okay, so it's really, these three items at the bottom here, the preamble gives some context. And we have identified these three items because we recognize if we could have a better sense of these three things, it would inform our decision making, or at least our recommendations. So, questions that you have?
Sure. So I'm assuming that call service data, the traffic issues, that exists somewhere that we can easily, hopefully, get. Citizen concerns to evaluate, is that something that already exists, or is that something we're gonna have to design something to find it or learn about
I missed what you said. Does what exist?
it? It says citizen concerns to evaluate our public health needs. Do we already have that information, or is that something that we're gonna have to solicit?
So I think, Andrea, you can probably kind of summarize to the PAC some of the concerns that you hear. We've also set into motion, let's say even for traffic concerns, a system within the borough. So we can collect that if you have specific questions. I think we get a lot of kind of quality of life, I think, concerns that sometimes are miscoded as safety concerns. I think, Andrea, you probably get some of those as well,
Yeah,
issues that aren't necessarily law enforcement, but are quality of life concerns.
The traffic concerns, speeding, some of the smaller things. I don't frankly hear a lot of concerns about safety in the borough, but occasionally more about speeding and people not obeying stop signs and traffic. Yeah.
So, when you mentioned that you, as the public safety committee, hear a lot, like, is there a recording of any kind of complaint? And what does that cause, and where is it kept? Does that, yeah.
Do I?
Yeah, to answer Ken's question, so it sounds like the questions or concerns are coming to different places, so how are they collected as data?
So now we have the MyGov. So you'll see a lot of the safety concerns captured. For example, just today I had a neighbor text me a picture of overgrown shrubs. So people need to divert from the sidewalk to the street. And I actually said, thank you, but can I ask you to please register this into the system? I got another text today with someone who, on Essex, there were probably 20 trash cans in the right of way that was blocking the sidewalk and causing, taking the right of way and having pedestrians route into the street where there's traffic concerns. Again, so can you please put that in that .gov? So we have that data that we continue to kind of shuffle people towards that formal process. For traffic concerns, I think some of your best data collection is actually not captured in the engineering reports, I would suggest, but rather resident concerns. So for example, we'll have the traffic engineers come and they'll say, no, the average speed on Conway is 25. We understand that, but it feels like 40 when you're on a congested small street. So while it doesn't register a formal law enforcement ticket, it is a quality of life and arguably a safety concern. And we have some of those data from when formal emails go to our committee.
Yeah, and as a committee, we can share with you anything you're interested in. I mean, our agenda is built each month for public health and safety in a way that includes the concerns. So the concerns are kind of filtered to us, especially the traffic concerns.
But those are the vocal ones, not the ones that
Right.
we might not.
Correct.
Right,
Absolutely.
and some of these concerns that have been described are not necessarily police issues,
Right.
so they don't necessarily come to me. So I don't necessarily hear, overgrown trees, or, it does impact your visibility, and maybe block signs and stuff, and yes, but that's more, like Kevin Walsh, zoning officer, and he's not under police.
I'd just like to offer another point that just answer your question. Part of what your question sort of reverse engineering why we created the PAC to begin with. Because part of what's been happening for years is there will be health concerns. So they can be anything from concerns about shade trees to overgrown bushes to traffic, just the need for better traffic calming, or concerns even about officers. We haven't been doing many of those recently, but long ago we had a lot of those. But there really hasn't been any particular way for council to manage that sort of basket of concerns. And it's very much like when the Planning Commission became a body that became responsive to the voice of the general public, then the Planning Commission began to hear more about the community concerns around zoning. And I think it's the background here is that it's our hope that now that we've created the PAC and a citizen body that is sort of listening, that this will be an occasion for us to gather more of these in a way in which we can act upon them and make sense of them.
So I have two questions to follow up with. The first one is, it sounds to me like maybe people were complaining about quality of life or wanted their voices to be heard about issues that didn't know where to go. Now they're saying they can write something maybe on their own in MyGov, which I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is, I would guess that a lot of people don't. So that maybe one of our sub-charges as a group would decide is that we find a way to collect some data and organize it before we make any suggestions. It sounds like your data might be a little all over, understand the ways and not criticism. The second thing is, what is call to service that?
So you said in your letter that you analyze police and have analyzed police forces. So, I would suggest that perhaps we look at Montgomery County and what are our call to service data. In other words, when someone calls 911, that's a call to service.
Okay.
That I'm sure you use in your field as well. We get the UCR data, which measures arrests. Well, arrest doesn't measure crime. It just, in fact, measures arrests and does not give you a full crime picture. It's important for us to understand what are the calls to service, what percentage of those calls to service actually require law enforcement officers. I've been for years asking for that data because I suggest the majority, I suspect rather, the majority of our calls to service, in fact, don't require a law enforcement officer. For example, my neighbor called 911 because there was a dead fox on their sidewalk and Sergeant Finaccio came and picked it up. That is not at all under the job description or expectation of a Narberth police officer. So
Wait a minute, let's stop there. I'm trying not to do this. You don't think that's a job for the police officer?
no. If you had a dead mouse in your yard, I don't think you would not need someone with a constitutional right.
But you
Or
said this
just-
is a dead fox.
But just say,
Yeah.
so for example, the way that's handled in most municipalities or townships in the Commonwealth is there's an
Animal control, yeah.
division,
Yeah.
division that would manage that.
Or you draw short straws of who in your family has to throw out the dead fox, but I certainly would not think it is a duty of a law enforcement officer.
Currently, just FYI, there is no animal control officer over at Lower Meridian.
There's not, but there is in the county. And the county, and in fact, we had an issue with a dog where all the police did was call county animal control and they came right out. So that's a sense of really understanding what are the needs, what are police getting called to do.
Oh, wait, so I'm a little bit stuck on this example since you brought it up. So, and I think you made a good point, right? So, is it in the job description of the police? We're not actually looking at that here. We're looking at citizen concerns. So, are citizens concerned that our police is, we're using the resources to respond to the fox? Or, are we drumming up business here and citizens kind of like the way things are? Like, is that something that you want us looking at also? I mean, we have a couple of examples on the table of laws that used to be, or things that we've heard from community members about the shrubbery and speeding on Conway. But if we're looking at citizens' concerns, are we also looking to citizen satisfaction?
So,
Absolutely. I think that's all. Those are really great questions. I think those are things that we need to discuss as a committee. I don't think we're not going to be involved with those discussions.
Yeah.
If I'm not,
You'll direct
I
that
understand
according
why
to
this
your.
is not a policing issue, but specifically talking about citizen concerns, that's a different.
But that's not our own charge.
no, and I,
It's just what we were having to be talking about at the moment that was brought up.
Right, that strikes me as number 2 here. How do we help people age in place? And maybe it's that we need an animal control here or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be cautious. I would look at data, right? I'm a social scientist. I would use my.gov has been out for months. It's in every single flash, every single week. It's on Facebook. If a citizen goes to a meeting, we say use my.gov. If a citizen emails us, we use my.gov. I don't think it's your job or responsibility to promote any more than we have. So I would use official data and be cautious of saying, like, let's do a content analysis of Facebook complaints.
But just to add to tag on, so like if you, for example, look at the 911 calls, so from the company growth, just to see what they are. Because if 3 of them are like people locked out of their cars, like, I think this is it's a discussion. Like, would you want to have a sworn officer responding to a lockout? Or is there a better way for that to happen? Or locked out of a home? Just looking at them and making your own assessment, and whether they're citizens' concerns or not. Like, what are the officers doing during these calls?
And Cindy, you had said that you've been wanting to get your arms around this for years,
Mhm.
which I think is great. So the first question I'm sure the president had was they responded to. But
Sure.
What has gotten in your way of getting a sense of that over the years that you wanted to?
So I've always, again, wanted the data from the call to service from the county and then really kind of do a coding or
And
analysis.
What has kept you from getting it?
I'm sorry?
What has kept you from getting it? And what is our obstacle?
So I just joined PHS in January. I was never on the committee, and my first suggestion was to form this committee. So that's what kept me. I'm just really eager to look at those data to
So
get.
we should be able to get it without a problem.
Oh,
That was
Yeah, John, you're making a face.
No, that's my question. Mayor, do you get monthly reports from Montgomery County on 911?
Not from the county, the chief was giving monthly reports of, statistics of crime in the county, and I assume he was using probably the data came from the county, but he was issuing monthly reports of statistics of crime
Right.
in the borough.
But there's, as Cindy points out, there's UCR reports, there's also the calls for service. So UCR is going to tell us about, crimes, arrests, et cetera. The calls for service will just be a report generated based on 911.
I was not getting that specific data.
No,
Okay.
correct. That's my
So we don't have a chief right now. And so from a practical standpoint, are you expecting the committee to contact Montgomery County Emergency Services to request that data? Or is that something that we're going to rely on the mayor or the police department to contact emergency services to get that information?
I would suggest that it's more appropriate for the mayor or the sergeant to collect those data.
Yeah, probably a sergeant would have,
Yeah, Sergeant
the
Fernandez.
sergeant would have the tools.
So as a committee, we identify what we want or need as a wish list after we have discussion, and then we can present that to the mayor, to the committee
Correct.
about the data that we need, and then we will cooperatively work with you to do the
Absolutely.
nuts
Right,
and bolts of how to get it.
I would suggest that Sergeant Fernaccio would be in a position to
Sure.
get that specifically.
And then I can also request we can request the MyGov
Yeah.
and the traffic formal data as well, just to kind of complement those call to service data.
Has there been a discussion among the police department or about how they feel that they're being used correctly or incorrectly? Is this part of the reason for the police advisory committee?
They, I would say policing is very hierarchical in my experience, and so the chief was the person who represented the department and came to our committee. Since the chief left for another position, we've had police members, of the department attending our public health and safety meetings. I think it's been very productive to speak directly with the sergeant and the officers under the sergeant. So,
The Sergeant Fernaccio brought Officer Belfield at the last meeting, 2 meetings ago, Sergeant Fernaccio brought Officer Dutton along. And they asked us a lot of questions about this committee. We're excited about it. We're excited to work with them.
yeah, they mentioned several times that they would really like to share their experience. And so we invited them to this committee, to be of help.
But they're having big complaints that they don't, that maybe the public doesn't understand what their role is, and that people should not be calling them about a dead animal that needs to be protected.
I'm not ready about that.
I think just to clarify, police nationally are called to do things outside of their duty every single day. We expect them to be mental health practitioners and experts, behavioral counselor experts, elder care social workers. So when I say this, it is not reflecting a dynamic in Narberth that is not reflected nationally with the role of law enforcement.
Does the borough have an official citizen complaint policy for citizen complaints regarding officers or the police department?
So, if there was typically, if there is a policy, and I don't have it, it's in the policy book. It basically is like if they had a complaint with an officer, they go to the chief. If they had a complaint with the chief, they should come to me.
But sets out a procedure
It sets
how
out
they
the
can
procedure.
submit.
There are policies in there.
And is it on the website? So if I wanted to
Yeah, they should
report,
be actually on the website.
But if we wanted to,
Well, that's one of the changes we made with Chief Gallagher, is we published the policies.
and if we wanted, again, as a committee, we could, through either get that through the mayor or through the sergeant, if we wanted to obtain
The policies.
this, well, not yet the policy, number
They're-
one,
they're
and
all
number two,
public.
the actual complaints, if there were any.
I have not received complaints. I have not received any complaints.
But as far as like, this is anecdotal and but as far as like an official request, if I'm thinking if we're a committee, we're gonna be a little more, it's not just gonna be, hey, has anybody heard anything? It'd be more like a formal request to the police department, have there been any citizen complaints in whatever the period that we're meeting, whether it's monthly or quarterly or whatever. And then we could get that information. That would-
Yeah, I'll tell you there's been no complaint. Yeah.
you talked about the hierarchical nature. Would we be able to, or do we foresee any challenges with having interviews with any of the officers or focus groups with them to get their take and their perspective?
So,
We have to go through the sergeant, is there the
yeah,
process?
I think we would work through the sergeant. My understanding is that the officers, the department in general, is very open to engaging in dialogue. The one, Cindy can speak to this, the one constraint maybe is we don't want to ask people to kind of go on overtime or, I don't know, violate the union.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be really careful with the FOP, and if we mandate a meeting, that would solicit a grievance from an officer that we're making them go. So we will have the use of our solicitor, John Walco. He's the borough solicitor, is available to all commissions. Perhaps before you invite any officers, perhaps we run that by John Walco just to make sure we're not violating any procedures or expectations. But I think as long as you invite officers to participate, and it's clear that it's not mandatory, much like I did with this meeting, I think we'll be fine.
Mayor, in the past, Chief Gallagher, the past couple of years, has really been generous about offering the opportunity for ride-alongs.
What?
Ride-alongs.
Ride-alongs.
Both for council members and sometimes for members of the general public who are interested. Do you think that Sergeant Bernaccio would be open to offering ride-alongs to members of the PAC?
That's a possibility. I would have to talk to him about it.
Because that would be a good, if so, that would be a great opportunity for members of the PAC to
That is,
engage with officers and ask questions.
It's a great idea.
Chief was always very open to it. I will talk to Chief, Sergeant Bernaccio, and that's a possibility.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And maybe there are other ways, I'm just trying to think that besides interviews, how do we get their feedback in a good way of what is the next level public health mechanism to solve some of this?
Mhm.
Yeah, because we do want to be mindful about overtime and their time, you know, an extra thing.
So that's why the ride-along is good, because they're already
Right,
doing the job.
right.
Right.
That's actually an interesting idea.
That's a great idea.
Mhm.
It's a great idea.
Right, so that may mean just practically that not all five of you can meet with someone at once, but maybe one of you, you know, maybe
Yeah.
there could be a series of
Yeah, with different officers.
conversations. Yeah.
And if you can please compile a list of those data that you're looking for, we can, as a committee and mayor, figure out how we can get you those formal data.
So Cindy, can you just clarify, you said we have UCR data, we don't have like call to service?
We've never received the call to service data.
And that's just 911.
That's 911, and that goes all right through the county.
That, oh, but the county has it.
Correct,
And we can request it or we can get it.
correct.
Okay, so we do have it. But
Yeah, we don't have it in Narberth, but it exists.
We have access.
Correct, yeah, that's,
It hasn't been examined.
Okay.
Is there a different level of data that's not 911 calls? I know that our officers, there's not necessarily staffing in the police station so that people are picking up, but do we have a list of calls that come in and messages or when people call the office to talk to the police?
There is,
I don't know that that's
I
compiled.
believe they keep a log, at least I know Chief Gallagher always kept a log for walk-ins. And I've seen it. So I don't know if the officers continue to
Or
maintain
like
that
hailing
log.
them on the street. Yeah, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I went into battle report about it.
They have a log.
Right, which wouldn't be a
That, but
911
that would be a
call.
911 call, I called that office and said some of their,
Right.
so that's the type of thing that you would.
Yes.
I will say though, in the last 4 years, 5 years that John Gallagher was here, he directed absolutely everyone to call 911. So I am really confident that you're going to have,
He, yeah,
Nice
it
data.
was his, because we don't have people at the station 24/7, and often when there's an officer on duty, they're patrolling. In order to get an officer immediately, no matter what the situation, he wanted to go through 911, so it was recorded.
However, you know, from just on the few occasions that I've been in the police station and just spending time with Chief Gallagher, there wasn't one where somebody didn't come to the door and ask for something. So I think that may be somewhat commonplace. Or they'll even go to the office. And then the office
Yes, they will
direct
show up
them
at
to
the office.
So there's definitely like something to observe there.
And it was approved in the budget, although John Gallagher never got to it, get an administrator to work in the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, to answer phone calls and do non-police administrative work. And the office really would like that to happen because it takes pressure on people walking into the office to disturb them to answer questions.
What level of personnel information are we able to get access to? So this one has a social work degree, or this one has experience in hostage negotiation, I don't know.
We could ask the mayor and sergeant to have updated resumes.
The sergeant could give you information on the background of the specialties, who's been trained in particular specialties, yes.
So if you want to add that on your request list, we can forward that resume request.
Can we obtain copies of their training certificates? Not the personnel file, but the training,
The
their
training
file?
that they had, I would think so. I'd have to double check.
Okay.
The thing is that
Huh?
we get like a personnel, like, understand, like, so who's employed, when, what the hours are, like.
Yeah.
So fundamental
Yeah.
knowledge,
The
like,
structure of the
let's
ship.
just
Yes.
Yeah.
start with, like, not even what their training is.
Yep.
Who's there, well,
Can you add that to your list that you send us?
That's terrific. Yeah.
And
that
a
would be
lot of
very
this
good.
information Sergeant Fernaccio can tell you.
Yeah, if you send a running list, I'll create a table and just kind of delegate who is going to get what, and I'll ask the office to create a SharePoint, which I believe, did Shade Tree and stuff have access, EAC, do they have access to SharePoint? Okay, I'll get it all to you.
I just want to, wait, this gets back to the fundamental question, which is clarification on the three points of the rechargeable. The comprehensive plan that we're referencing it to is the comprehensive plan. The 2020 comprehensive plan, right?
Right, 2040, yeah. Right, it was published in 2020.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Where can we find that?
That's on our
Online.
website, and there's a section, a pull-down menu, I think it says government and reports, and you can see it there. Even probably you can email me. I can send it.
Just Google Narberth Comprehensive Plan, it comes, the full document comes.
Just take a step back or two different things. One is, if we all communicate with one another that are not an official meeting, what are the sunshine law rules that we need to know about?
Yeah, we actually have a recording that our manager Samantha did, that we can share with you all. Remember she did that recently?
Yep, she did.
But I know like 3 borough council members can't be together. Could 3 of us be together and talking about business, or is that we're violating sunshine law?
I do not believe, but I'm going to defer to the attorney sitting at the table. I do believe that you cannot discuss that.
Okay.
Or if you did, your personal email would be subject to a right to know request.
You know, John Walker's mantra is, if you have any doubt, be careful, but the primary thing is that not to make any decisions.
Right, you
Right.
can discuss.
You can actually share information, you just can't make decisions.
So I will say you all will be getting an invitation for October. We're having a volunteer appreciation event with just some light fare, and John Walker will be available. And then we'll also give you that information for all boards and commissions on expectations with recording a public meeting, as well as sunshine law recommendations, just so everyone's on that same page. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for that question.
My other step back is this, is someone here taking really good notes? Because I can say I'm not always the best note taker, and we just said like 5 things that we want to like make sure we get to them, and so, or can one of us take really good notes?
I mean, would be permitted via email to kind of converge our notes and then just review them together and make sure this is what we want to be like as our summary of the meeting and what we're requesting? Is that okay? That
Yeah.
Communicate
Yep.
on email?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
That's why I asked those in that order.
Yeah.
Is there a recommendation, you know, about whether or not to use personal emails for government-related conversations?
So that ties in with the sunshine law as well.
I'm not talking so much about
Huh?
liability covers.
So wait, in the olden days, like, even council members didn't have their, so these days, both council members and staff have their accounts, and people on boards and commissions just use private email. The rule of thumb under Samantha Bryant has been that if you send an email to say a group, BCC the members, so that you don't end up with a kind of a conversation occur. You're just sharing information in one direction with one another. So if you, for example, a member of this committee wanted to share information with the Public Health and Safety Committee, or the BCC the other members. And you can mention that in the body of the email. We have BCC so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. But that will then prevent everyone from replying all and ending up with sort of a thread that becomes like a kind of implied work, kind of work product towards a decision. So that's kind of how we've been managing it, even with our program.
I'm thinking more along the lines of it. This is like way far-fetched. It's like roll with your career. We recommend to you that you don't let police respond to animal complaints anymore, right?
Right.
Someone calls in and says, "There's a wild animal in my yard." The police don't go, and they get attacked, right? And then they sue the borough, and we made this recommendation. I'm thinking like along those lines. Is there?
I'm just
and then
thinking-
we'd be covered by.
You're
There's usually volunteer liability
Yes.
when they have.
You're
All of our
indemnified.
emails are accessible.
I don't think you're going to
Using our
stop an
personal
officer
email
from
account.
responding to that call. I
I'm
don't think it matters what we say. I think an officer's going to respond to that call.
It is a very
It's a
far-fetched
life-safety
example.
issue.
I'm just
It's
trying
not
to.
going to stop. It's like the fire department often jokes that, like we're going to go where we need to go regardless of what's in the bag.
No, I understand your point.
My point
Yeah.
is just like, is there a recommendation, not from the point of view of like how to manage it in terms of BCC, but whether or not we should be using.
Yeah, let's.
Rebecca, you are indemnified as volunteers, right?
I'm
So,
not actually talking about the indemnification.
Okay.
I'm just talking about the access to personal information if you've been using personal email.
of whether there could be a right to know request of your personal account. I think we should clarify that with John
Well, I
Walco.
mean, when we receive right to know requests, it's only, we're asked to submit relevant emails ourselves. No, it's not like we hand over our account. Right.
Correct. But I appreciate that that's your personal account and you wouldn't be mindful.
I
So,
mean, theoretically, someone could subpoena the whole thing, like if they said you're using it. It's true.
let's go, I'll send this email to John Walco, our
Yeah,
solicitor, to get a
let's-
formal
It's a
answer.
practice question, it's not,
Agreed.
and again, I don't actually think.
He's going to go over all of this in October, but I don't want to wait a couple weeks, so I'll get that formal email from him. I think that's good to know.
Yeah, so, just in terms of, I just wanted to say, in terms of workflow, you could kind of work through these in the sequence that they're presented. It's up to you, but, I mean, you could work on collecting the data first, and then go to number 2, and then go to number 3. It's really up to you. You could also think about presenting your recommendations or findings in the form of memos that could be kind of one at a time. In other words, you don't have to wait till you've completed all 3, to submit something. You could work on one piece and then send a memo to our committee, and then move to the next piece. So you all can decide if originally we had conceived of a quarterly meeting schedule where you would meet 4 times a year and you would kind of divvy up the research a bit that you would do in between meetings, and then in the meetings themselves you would come to some decisions on, recommendations. But it is, as it's written in the resolution, it's up to you if you think it's better to meet monthly, for example, that's an option. And it could change depending on the work.
Is there anything that feels urgent at the moment or that is time sensitive that we need to be aware of?
Well,
Yeah.
what do you want to say? I mean,
So I think particularly that call to service, data and analysis, is particularly timely. We are going to be entering in the spring a new contract negotiation. We actually just last year signed off on our last contract negotiation, right? Was it 18 months ago?
It took a very long time.
It took 4 years nearly to work through arbitration for our last police contract, and we'll start that process again in March.
I don't anticipate that contract being signed immediately. I mean, I assume there'll be a prolonged
Agreed. We're hoping not another
4 years.
4 years. I personally, as a council member, am very interested in looking at that call to service data to get an understand of what that picture is, because I think that best sets us up for an informed discussion as we negotiate for police. So that would be my
You're
first.
thinking about UCR and call service.
UCR and call to service are 2 very different data points.
Right, but I'm wondering if all you care about is call to service, or if you're.
Well, I have the UCRs. So I mean, please do that, and that's all public. That is the information that the chief provided each month. So that UCR data are already posted online. If you would like us to compile it, please just put that in that table or data request. And that'll give you a good picture too. I'm sorry, before we move on, I do want to say I'm going to be the liaison to your group. So please, any requests, we have assured the office staff that this would not be an extra responsibility. So please contact me with all logistics for meeting times or technologies, that data requests, and I'll get all that. Not Manager Brian.
Yeah, we're trying to protect the manager's time a bit because she is short-staffed at the moment. We had
Yeah.
the assistant was on leave for several weeks. So.
Right.
Is there, could you share memos that have been particularly helpful to you so you can understand what has worked well? Since this is being modeled after.
Yeah.
Oh, EAC, yeah.
It's really helpful to see what has been helpful.
Sure. And the plan, you could use planning commission letters as an example. There's a
Whatever,
major
if you can
recommendation. The EAC
pick out,
is
like,
really
I think
good
there's
at
like
it.
maybe 3 or 4 memos that were particularly
Yeah.
helpful. You know, either one way or another, but that could give us,
Yeah.
so that we're not recreating the wheel of the word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think as a recommendation too, because 3 of you live actually near Jesse Lytle, who's really been just a force of nature with the EAC. And when they developed the climate action plan and their memos, I think he would be a really good resource on a group that, I mean, I thought brought a really ambitious recommendation that was supported by evidence.
Yeah.
He may just be helpful kind of talking through that process.
Yeah, no, we can definitely do that.
And you know.
So here's what I have for our request that I brought down, and then hopefully other people have other stuff that I missed. On a personnel level, a training certificates, resumes, skill sets, what their schedule is for the overall, when are they scheduled to work.
Like just a list of personnel, right.
Visit logs that might or might not exist in the MyGov records, correct? And then I have a note of just like budget and inventory, because inventory was something you mentioned earlier, that there might be purchases that need to happen. So if we have that inventory / any budget information, is there anything?
In the borough budget, and things are broken down pretty specifically in the borough budget. So if you look at the borough budget, you'll get a really good sense of how things are broken.
But in theory, the inventory is older, so
Correct.
if it's not called for a new purchase.
Correct. You need the inventory list.
Right.
Chief Gallagher is published up in inventories. Has Chief Gallagher produced an inventory recently?
Not recently.
Well, the last budget cycle would have been
The last
probably
budget
this year,
Right.
but Sergeant needs to update that.
Okay.
And I think it's important for the budget, particularly Cheryl and Katie, as you think of, one of the expectations of this group was thinking, how do we utilize the built environment as one of our potentially most effective public safety tools? And I thank you both for getting that certification. I'm jealous. I wanted to get it. So I think it starts tomorrow.
Oh, great. Okay.
So last year, for the first time, we put in under our public safety budget a built environment line, which is very non-traditional. You typically see police, vehicles, fire, etc. And it really hasn't been utilized yet, but it really pointed to, I think, a philosophical and kind of an approach to public health and safety of saying, how do we utilize things like raised pedestrian crosswalks or stormwater curb bump outs to address some of our most serious concerns, which is traffic and walkability, and to think beyond just writing speeding tickets to control traffic, but using that built environment. So that, at some point, is personally one of the things I really look to you and Jeff Eldon to work with police to say, how do we really shift that mentality and put that those projects under public safety, which in a lot of ways, public health and safety, I believe they belong there and not infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, the number one concern that we hear is traffic concerns in public health and safety. And it's frustrating because it can be very hard to solve these traffic concerns with, police time. Like, that's not necessarily the best solution. There might be a more permanent built environment solution.
Well, it's probably a good thing, because it means that the more scary concerns aren't there.
We are a blessed, privileged
Yeah,
community,
something you
that's
do
for
with
sure.
traffic.
That is for sure.
What does council mean by number 3? It's a pretty, when you say determine what tools, resources, and personnel are needed, are you talking about analyzing police personnel, or are you talking about non-sworn officers, non-sworn personnel to assist with training? Was there any discussion of what were you guys?
Yeah. So I think at some point we can share the matrix report. I mean,
That's public. That's up
public
there.
already. And this was done maybe in 2015.
15. No, was it?
Yeah,
I think it's about 5.
No,
I think 17.
it was early. Okay, we were on civil service together.
But, in that report, they talk about different recommendations for how big the department should be. Should it be 5 officers, 6 officers, 7 officers, or 8? Right now, we are 5. And we would be 6 when we have our new chief. So, one question around personnel is just like the size of the department, the number of officers. Another is like the skill set. Are there different trainings that you would recommend? Is there a position, a non-sworn position that would be beneficial, such as a social worker?
or administrator.
Or administrator, or some combination thereof? Those kinds of things are the personnel questions, I think.
Is there not, we don't have an administrator right now?
We did not. So why, it was approved, but why
It
was it
was
never filled?
approved, and it just didn't happen under Chief Gallagher. We kept working on it, and I think he had other priorities, and he didn't get it.
And there's enough work for a full-time, 40-hour admin, or 20 hours,
That's
That's
at least,
question.
part-time, the office, the borough office would like us to have them, because they get interrupted fairly quickly.
right.
So they're part of the
There's a
discussion.
workload that's sort of being shared around.
I saw that recently the council's approved a search for a new chief. Has that process started, or? seem to be
We're
routine?
discussing.
Just out of curiosity, because I don't want to bring this, we don't have to. Has there ever been any research on how other boroughs handle all these issues?
Well, I think that's a great question. And one of the opportunities
Absolutely.
for the committee is to research, best practices in other similarly sized boroughs, because it is a challenge.
And
our
if you
size.
need, I'm in touch with the mayors of many other boroughs in Montgomery County, and I can put you in touch with them, and so you can discuss how they handle it. And I have found talking with other mayors in boroughs of comparable size, to be very helpful.
Yeah. So did you say that mayors in other counties or?
In other boroughs in Montgomery County.
Okay.
So we can also, I think we have a tremendous amount of data too. So when you have that list, I think a lot of what we've done in council to inform some of these questions, actually, we have those data available. There's governor's reports on policing in small municipalities that is out in public. I can supplement some of that pretty immediately for you all.
So you can supplement it with personal knowledge or supplemental.
So as I said, we've collected some of those data just to even inform these questions. So I have some of that, but there's also a lot of public data. For example, the governor just put out a report on how do you handle these small townships and municipalities and police force. So
you mentioned that maybe you couldn't get into SharePoint. Could we create a drive?
I want to ask that. Can you can you hold that thought, and I'll send that to John Walco tomorrow.
Okay.
Um,
Just somewhere, so that it's a resource, a depository, expository public, not.
Right.
China has to leave at 8.
Yeah, I have to leave at 8 too. I have a fire meeting.
Procedural issues
Yeah.
as to what we're going to do. If we're going to be meeting monthly, quarterly, et cetera. Would it be the next meeting where we would vote on the officers of the committee, or?
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate, you know, in your first meeting. This is kind of orientation,
Got it.
you know. Yeah, so I think at the next meeting, in the resolution, we can clarify there will be a chair and a vice chair. Yeah, I think that's it.
I think we should, personally, I think we should table whether we're going to do monthly or quarterly until we have a meeting and figure out what we're going to do. So maybe we just have
But I
another
think we should
meeting.
set a new, yeah, but I think we should set a new meeting, not quarterly, I think we should set
Right.
a meeting sooner
Yeah,
rather than.
The question is, so we have this list of things. How long reasonably will it take us to get this list that we've talked about and to be able to have a little bit of time to digest it? So if we said we really need the UCR, how long will it take?
A week or two?
Not the UCR, not
Yeah.
11.
What's it?
A week or two to get resumes. I would say a week or two. If you send me that list, I'll start right away to compile that. A lot of that is already public. Can I ask though, if you're all going to decide on a date and time that works, if I don't have to coordinate that, that's fine. If you just tell me, I'll reserve the room, the technology, I'll come the first couple times, just to kind of make sure that that works and you can all get online. And then if there's any issues, I just ask that you reach out. I can come and sit quietly. If that's helpful, you tell me, right? Are we comfortable with that?
I think it's good to have a liaison. So, but it's very much the five of you.
Yes, yes,
Does everyone have daytime availability?
yes. You have morning availability, because, I think we may get
7
time.
I would do it.
7
I don't
a.m.
have much evening availability. I can do 7 a.m.
I would do 7 a.m.
or 8
Cuties.
That's early, but
It is early, but-
I'll do whatever works for me, yeah. And maybe, what I propose is that maybe we alternate or change around what we're doing, because I know that 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock is really difficult for some people, evenings are much harder for me, so. in the middle of the
And you all have everyone's email because I did not BCC you, so you just had everybody's contact information?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in the email that we got.
Right.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So do you want to meet in the morning for our next meeting then? Is that?
That would be great.
Even if we don't get all the data by the next, if we meet, I would say maybe in a month, we would at least have some data and maybe we could discuss what we want to do.
A month is
7
reasonable.
months. That's reasonable.
Yep.
A month is reasonable to get that.
Um,
The week of the 10th should be good for me.
we did the week of the 17th.
Great. I can meet any, if it's at 7:30 in the morning, say, I can meet any day.
I'm sorry, what did we say, the 17th?
I wonder, folks, can we adjourn the formal meeting so I don't have to, because if we have to.
Before we do, I know, I'm sure Rob wants to say something in conclusion, but I just want to say, just from my perspective that this is a pretty important evening, and I think this is a really exceptional opportunity to learn about her path, the residents to learn about her path by the creation of the PSC. It's really a new day. And I'm just like, so, I think it's really refreshing that you all were willing to do this, and I'm really excited about the way in which your eyes and ears on these questions will really define our borough's situation in 20 years very differently. And I've seen that happen with the other board solutions in the past. It's really profound, but it's like the arc is really, I think it's really
Thank you all. Okay, so with that, I'm going to adjourn your meeting so I can stop this. And Rob, Rob,
Thank you.
Said the next meeting is?
We did.
Oh, we're
Okay.
talking about representatives and then we're gonna.
Yeah, I'm gonna